Hello, everyone, and welcome to Jobcast by Indeed. Stand 2, interview tips for military service members and spouses. So, meeting your host. I myself, Andrew Dennis, Military and Veterans Program at Indeed.com. I am an ally in this group. Mario Carpanzano is a U.S. Army veteran, and he's also head of global infrastructure and physical security at Indeed. And we have Tim Kirk. He's on the Learn and Experience team at Indeed. He is also an Army veteran. He was in the 11 Bravo, and he joined Indeed 2 years ago. He heads up the Senior Learning Experience team as a facilitator, and he's excited to run you through these workshops. Let's get started.
Okay, great. Thanks, Drew. So I'm going to kick it off with doing our homework. In this section, we're going to talk about interviewing, what to look for in your jobs that you apply for, and what to look for in your companies. First is our types of jobs, so types of interviews, excuse me. So our first and foremost is our screening interview. This interview is going to be mostly looking at the qualifications you have, your experience, and what kind of education you might have. It's primarily used in your first rounds of interviews just to ensure you have the minimum requirements. Behavioral interviews are used to talk about what you've done in your past positions. So they'll give you scenarios possibly on tell us about a time in your last job where you had X situation and how you responded to it. Next is a competency-based interview. I like to think of this as a hybrid between a screening and behavioral. They're going to ask you questions about situations that you've dealt with in your career, but they also want to see how you've used your skills, qualifications, and your education to overcome those obstacles that you may have had, or a situation that you may have had in your previous positions. A case interview is they will ask you questions that are maybe realistic or they may be fake, but they'll ask you questions to talk about a situation and they want to see how you react to it. For example, if you're the manager of two people and they're not getting along, what would you do about that? So they'll give you a case, something that would apply to what your previous experience and the job that you might job and role that you're going into or would like to go into, and they're going to ask you how you would react to that situation. A panel interview is exactly how it sounds. You might have a couple people, the hiring manager, people from other departments that you would work with on a daily basis, even possibly other members of the team, so that they can get a feel for how you would work with inside the team, outside the team. If you have a position that has to work with other departments, they'll bring in people from those other departments to ask questions, so they know that your experiences and able to cross talk over different departments is there. That's what they're looking for. And there's no these are not mutually exclusive. It might start off as a screening interview, might turn into a competency-based interview, then they'll ask you some case questions possibly, and other people might come in and out, or however they may do it. The most important thing with any interview is to stay flexible. Open interviews, very similar to a hiring event, really are great places to network and great places to show recruiters, because that's who mainly you see at hiring events, some of your skills and kind of bring your resume to life. So not only are they seeing your resume, but they're putting a face to it, and you're able to kind of better explain your experiences and talk to them about the positions they have open and their company, and talk about what you might bring to the table. And you never know, you might find a position or that you never thought of doing. It might be a title that you never heard before, but it's exactly what you've done before and something that you want to do, which brings us to looking for a job, looking for looking for the right position. It's very easy to look for operations manager position and say that's what I want to do, but no operations manager position that you find on our site are the same. So you have to look at the scope of work, the responsibility, and match that up with what your prior experience and what your comfort level is. So it's very important. And to that point, you also want to make sure the position that you're going for might have a title that's different than what you thought before, than what you were going to get, what you initially wanted. So it's important to read that job description. It's important to make sure you have those minimum qualifications. Make sure maybe you have more than the qualifications than they're looking for, but you like the position. Make sure you highlight that inside your resume and you build your resume to the position that you want. And then you can also look at those job descriptions and pick out parts of things that they talk about and relate it to your prior experience. It may not fit exactly, but if you can find the connections between what they're looking for in a position and something you've done, you should put that in your resume and make sure that it's highlighted so they understand that. Another very important thing to do is to understand who you're applying to and what does that company stand for. Many of us get out of the military and we want to make sure we want to still go to some place that's fast paced. We want to go to a place that's team oriented. We want to go to a place that is maybe we want a place that's veteran oriented, and we want a good balance of our work to life ratio. We want to make sure that we have time for our families, and those are all important things. And if those things aren't important for you, find out what's important for you and make sure that company meets those just as you would like. So and a lot of times that you can find this on their website. You can find this on their pages you can find this on their page on Indeed.com. There's a lot of different places you can find out. Are they military centric? So many companies are military centric. And what does that actually mean? And it's important when you get into interviews to ask these questions. What is the culture of your company? Are there many people from the military in the company? If that's not important to you, maybe you ask questions like, what is the work to family ratio? I have a family. I would really like to make sure I spend time with them. Make sure you go to a position that meets all of your needs, not just from a career position or a responsibility position or looking for the job, but it meets the culture and the work to family ratio. Whatever's important to you, your job, your career should match that. And when you interview at these companies, you have to make that perfectly clear. Remember, it's okay to ask questions about the culture of a company, and you're not wrong for asking those questions. Another very important thing to think about is know your pay range and what your expectation is. When you're on active duty, it's very easy to pull up the pay chart and know exactly how much you're going to make based on your time in service and your rank. And then, of course, you have those pay multipliers like basic housing allowance or cost of living allowance or separate rations. Whatever the case is, you have all those different things that may factor in. You have to, and then you're not going to get those anymore when you get out of the military. But it's also you have to understand what your worth is, what your budget is, and also where you're living, because those three things may be different in different places you go. The salary for an operations manager in Austin, Texas is going to be completely different than New York City. What your budget is different for everyone, and you have to make sure you have a position that allows you to meet all your budgetary needs. And then based on whatever your ability level or what your expectation level and scope and responsibility level matches what the pay is for whatever position you're in. So a lot of people will tell you when you get out of the military, don't go below this number no matter what. Well, sometimes you might have to go above. Hopefully everyone goes everyone goes above. Sometimes you might have to go below, but you have to understand what is too far below. If you can't pay the bills, then it's not worth taking that job. When I got off active duty, I almost took a position that was 25 to 30% lower than what I was making on active duty. And I was going to do it because I needed a job and I was getting nervous. And I stopped and I looked at the job, I looked at the responsibility, the scope of work, the salary, how the salary met my budget. And I stopped and I said, and I declined the position because the best thing for me was to look for a job that was closer to what my needs were, my financial needs were, and from a position standpoint, closer to my needs from a position, and wait and look for another job. So I did, and within 3 months, I had another position much closer to what my salary was, and I moved on from there to a much more comfortable position here with Indeed. So know what your worth is, but also be realistic. Lastly, let's talk about virtual interviews. The pandemic obviously has highlighted virtual interviews. Everyone is doing things from their home, but it wasn't uncommon before then. All of my interviews with Indeed were over Zoom or on the phone. And that was just based on situational. And that could still happen no matter where you are. The situation might be that you find yourself on a Zoom call when they're right down the street, even after this pandemic. So it's important to know what to do. Make sure you find yourself in a nice, quiet place. You check your surroundings. Your computer's in a good spot. They can see you very clearly. The lighting as well. If you want to have a cool background like this, I don't think anyone would frown on that, but I would also maybe do something more neutral, or just have a very clean, whatever's behind you, have it nice and clean. Don't be in front of any windows that can actually make some glare and it doesn't look very good. Make sure there's no lights right above you because that could shine down on you. That doesn't look great either. You just want to make a nice, clean presentation. You want to make sure that the focus is on you and not something that's happening in your background. Have a copy of your resume with you in case you want to refer to it, and give yourself a glass of water in case you need it. Maybe you're talking talking more than you expected and you need some water. Whatever makes you as comfortable as possible, go for it. The point is to replicate you in the room and having a conversation with someone just using technology, right? So check your webcam, check your microphone, check your audio, make sure all that is working properly. Do some checks, do some tests with some people, maybe with your family members or a friend beforehand, make sure everything's working properly. Close any other windows or applications you have on, any calendar messages. Make sure your internet connection is good. People are understanding if your internet goes out, but if you can avoid by making sure something's not downloading or whatever the case is on your internet connection, do everything you can to do that. Whatever alerts that might come up on your phone, shut those off. I would even take your phone, put it in another room. Don't even let yourself be tempted to take a look at it or go off with an alarm and you get sidetracked. And lastly, dress professionally. If the interview calls for a suit and tie, put on that suit and tie. Whatever, and it's okay to ask those questions. Send an email to the recruiter and ask what the attire is for the interview. Make sure you dress right. Adjust your lighting like we've talked about. Make sure everything is set up. You want to make sure that focus stays on you the whole time and center yourself inside the frame of the camera. Just like I have mine set up right now, right? Look as best you can, because it can be, if you don't do it all the time, it's hard to look right into the camera lens. Do the best you can. And whatever happens, someone walks into the room, your internet drops, whatever the case may be, respond appropriately, apologize if the situation mandates it, and just move and try to move on from it as best you can. Don't get flustered. Just do the best you can. Everyone is pretty understanding with what's happening, especially with technology, that sometimes it doesn't always work. If you can't get back on for whatever reason, send an email, make a phone call, say, I'm sorry for what happened. I'd really like to reschedule, and move on. You put yourself at ease that the reason why you did the reason why no one will not hire you for dropping for your internet not working. That's not the way it works, really. So I hope these were great tips for you. I hope they're helpful. Good luck with all your endeavors. And this ends my section. Thanks, guys.
Thank you for getting us through our first section, Mario. Tim here to lead you through our next section, which is how to ace the interview. You've got your foot through the door. Now we need to work on how do we talk through the interview, what's our mindset, and how can we provide our value add to this organization. And so what we're thinking about first when we're getting into this interview day, when you wake up that morning, go through a good routine for yourself, whatever that is. Whether you're one of those folks who loves to work out, you eat a certain breakfast item, whatever that is, make sure you go through that routine that gets you set and ready for the day. As you're going throughout that day, be sure anyone you're coming into contact with, whether they work at this organization or not, you are being kind and mannerly to. It helps project an air of positivity while you're going through this process and making sure that you're thankful and expressing that gratitude for the opportunity and that you have through this day. Pro tip here, keep an eye out on the employer's representatives, right? The folks that are interviewing you. How do they treat you and others on site to get a sense of what the company on a whole might look like or some of the cultural aspects of where you're interviewing. As you're going through, you're making sure that you're being mindful of your body language. That's in person and virtually, right? You're looking at the interviewer, you're making sure you're establishing that eye contact. If you're on a webcam, you're staring at that camera. It can be really difficult. I know you want to see people's faces, but stare in that camera to give that natural feel or as close to natural as if you're having a conversation. Maintain good posture. If you're on a webcam or in a virtual environment, make sure that you're within the full frame of your picture. You've got a little bit of space between the top part of your head and also the frame. Or you don't want to be cut off while you're viewing. So make sure you're navigating your space as best as possible. If you're in person, maintaining good posture, sitting up, standing up, whatever that is to ensure that projection of confidence. Make sure you're nodding while listening, or if you're on a webcam, lean towards the camera. What leaning in signals is that you're interested. And so do that throughout the interview process and paying attention and being mindful of your body language. And if you need to, feel free to utilize appropriate hand gestures. We don't want to use too many hand gestures or be too animated, but we also want to make sure we're paying attention, that we're not fidgeting or we're looking away from the screen or looking away from the folks that we're interviewing with. Right? We want to showcase that engagement. Now, there's a few things that will come up, and especially when it comes to questions that are very common throughout the interview process. And so what you want to do is think about these questions, and we can walk through what potential answers might look like for you as you're going through. Right? Tell me about yourself. This interview, they're gonna start out with this one, and this question is not meant for you to open the floodgates of your life and tell them anything and everything. What it's really meant is to give you that elevator pitch of yourself, right? What type of position are you looking at? What are the activities? And then some relevant highlights of your backgrounds, how they apply to this position and what you can specifically do about it, right? If you'd like, you can generally throw in some pets or hobbies or family, right? We want to be personable. We want to be relatable there, but we don't want to go too deep. You want to be memorable in this process. You want to be personable and relatable. So share some personal pieces, but also wrap it back and circle it back to it relating to that job. Why do you want to work here? They'll ask this question specifically to make sure that you took the time to research what the company values are, where they're headed, what are products, whatever that means. And so they want to see where you can fit in and provide that value add, right? With where that company is going, where that organization is going, what they do. One of the biggest pieces on here that I do want to cover and point out is, why are you leaving your current job? That's one of the biggest ones. There's a ton of reasons out there. Make sure you prepare a very thoughtful answer here and give the interviewer the confidence that you're being deliberate about this change. Do not focus on the negative aspects of your current or previous job. One of the worst things that you can probably do that doesn't look too well is essentially badmouth your previous employer or previous manager, whoever that might be. Focus on the future. Focus on what you hope to gain in this next position. Even if you had a bad experience at your previous job or location or area of work, talk about, I wanted a new challenge. I needed something new. I wanted something different. I needed to develop myself more. And that's why I'm here today. Be sure you work through your stories, right? A difficult work situation, how you overcame it. Have these stories lined up. Where did you find that success? Why was it difficult? Where did you develop? Where did you grow? What did you learn? And then lastly, what are the skills that you can bring from your military experience, right? Tap into that. Tap into those transferable skills that will help relate to this role. All the things that you had in the military or a part of the veteran community, whatever that might be, that's teamwork, that's mission oriented, that's being efficient, that's being effective. And I'll come back to talking about those. But be sure to start crafting your answers ahead of time. Script out what it might look like. That way, in the moment, you're natural, you're prepared, and you're ready for the answer. While you're answering, be sure to consider your audience. Avoid that military jargon or acronyms, things that folks who are not familiar with the military will not know. And if you do need to bring something up, simply explain what that is, right? What's the Cliff Notes version or a shortened version or definition of what that means, right? You don't want the interviewer to lose the meaning of your answers while they're trying to understand what you're actually talking about. Speak positively. Even if you're talking about a difficult situation or challenge, talk about that positive aspect of what you learned, how you grew in that moment, and how you developed over time. And provide those examples, real things that have happened to you that have prompted you to think about where you're at and where you want to go. Showcase that enthusiasm for teamwork. That's a big part of being a part of the military, but also that's what companies and organizations are looking for. Can you be a team player? Can you be a team leader? Can you lead others to greatness? Right? Projecting that enthusiasm. And then lastly, be confident. You have made it this far. Showcase that. While you're talking, while you're speaking, while you're engaging with folks, showcase your value that you can bring. If you're at the interview stage, that means they've already seen something within you. So have that confidence on hand and project it throughout the process. When you're engaging in discussion, be sure to use the STAR method. It stands for situation, task, action, results. This allows you to compartmentalize your experiences in life and formulate them into a very succinct and straight to the point story. That way it has a start, a middle, an end, and then how you essentially had an impact. And so situation, what's the context of your story? When, where did it happen? Task, what role did you play in that situation? Right? What were you trying to achieve? Action, what decisions did you make? What did you actually do? And then results, what happened? What resulted of your actions? What came out of that situation or that experience? Right? It helps highlight your skills and your accomplishments and helps keep those stories focused. You don't want to run on and on with the stories. That way you can maximize your interview time. Right? Interviewers really truly appreciate concise answers as they're conducting many interviews throughout the day. And so you want to allow your answer to happen And that way you can ask more questions. You're trying to bank time so that you can ask questions to the employer. That's key. I mentioned this a little bit ago, but we were talking about highlighting those transferable skills. These are super important and will be your secret weapon. All of these things that you see here on the screen: adaptability, leadership, organization, teamwork, rebuilding trust, self-discipline, strategic planning, problem solving. These are all things, that folks in the military have have a very deep knowledge of and experience with. And so what you want to do is focus on these. Right? If you're thinking about adaptability, that's how you used your skill set to achieve goals, work on teams, deliver projects, whatever that is, right? Ensuring that you can get those new skills down, right? You probably trained in a very rapid environment in the military and got down things as quickly as possible. That's where that adaptability comes into play. You're thinking about organization. That's thinking about how you organize tasks, relationships, your workspace. How can you meet deadlines, communicate with others in a timely manner, and follow instructions? Employers want to trust employees that can meet deadlines, take those notes, and ensure projects can follow through. Organization's key, but then also teamwork. We've hit that. Right? You want to have those qualities such as empathy, active listening, strong communication. Providing those examples of how you've demonstrated teamwork to that employer. And problem solving. How can you be solution oriented? That's what organizations want. They want your help in solving the issues, the situations, the things that are getting in their way. And so you want to talk about how you're not going to stay stuck and how you want to always move towards a solution and figuring out what's going on with a problem and then solving it. Be sure to tap into those as you're going through and thinking about how you're going to speak throughout the interview process. Now let's look at how we can talk through some example behavioral interview questions. These are key. And so these are some examples, not essentially exact answers that you can utilize, but we figured it would be important to showcase what that might look like in the process. The first one could be, tell me about a time when you had to complete a job with inadequate resources. And so your answer to this question will tell the interviewer how you react in high pressure situations, how you can tap into problem solving, and how you creatively will solve problems immediately and in unplanned situations, right? How can you pivot? How can you adjust on hand? This is considered a behavioral-based question because it requires you to provide a specific example that occurred in the past. So make sure you're thinking about when these have come up. This example says, the first time that I had to lead a field training exercise, I failed to notice that I had more men than gear until mid-exercise when the gear was needed. To improvise and devise a team-like situation and completed the exercise somewhat unconventionally but successfully. Now I check to make sure that I have everything I need before I begin a project or an exercise, ensuring that I have all of my logistics in order. Situation, task, action, result. Remember those as we're going through. Next question could be, can you relate your military career to what you want to do next? And so the interviewer wants to know that you've thought out your next steps. You've taken that time, you've been deliberate, and that you've chosen to interview with this company because you've been able to relate your skills and interests with what you'd be doing in the role. And so they want to see that come through in your answer. And so this is where you can incorporate that teamwork aspect as well, because we know that organizations are looking at that. And so you could say something to the effect of, in the military, I was responsible for planning, organizing, and leading troops into missions that had potential danger and could be intense. These experiences taught me to strategize and make decisions, plan, and provide guidance and support to my team, giving me an overall strong grasp on how to be an effective leader and to support troops in the best way possible. I'd love to bring that planning, organizing, and leadership to your organization. right? Circle back to them. The next one, it could be describe your ideal work environment. What interviewers are asking when they ask this question is they're trying to find out how well you'd fit into the company culture. So this is going back to doing your homework and looking at what the company values culturally. Right? How do they work? How do they engage in work? What are some of the things that the company believes in? And how do you then look at aligning with that? Where do you fit into that picture? That's what you want to bring up when you're answering this question. Focusing on that team oriented, being a listener, being a leader. Those are some aspects that'll be universal, but really tap into your research and finding what that company is valuing when it comes to culture. Lastly, we have what is your most significant career accomplishment to date? And so, in looking at this, the interviewer is looking how you used leadership, problem solving, and adaptation in circumstances, and how these set you apart from other candidates. And so, whether you talk about a team related accomplishment or one in which the credit is all yours, an open ended question like this allows the interviewer to identify what's important to you. What do you value? When it comes to accomplishments and success, this is what you want to find. And so I recommend actually looking back in terms of this question, identifying, let's say, 4 past successes, 4 things when you felt really successful at work and doing your job. What led to that success? What did it contribute? What was the impact? You really and truly want to showcase that in your answer. Make sure your response omits and doesn't have that military jargon. We're going back to that. Remember your audience. Folks won't know. But make sure you're transferring that information and those accomplishments and saying it in a way that folks can receive on the interviewing end. After you've wrapped up and shared your answers to a few questions from the employer, then it will be your turn to share your own questions to them. And this is key. Right? You want to come to the interview with questions in mind. So beforehand, practice at least asking 3 questions. I'd at least would have 5. These are some solid ones that you can start with, right? Can you tell me more about the day-to-day responsibilities of this job? Especially if you're talking with the hiring manager, right? The person that might be in charge of you or be your manager. That's a great question for them. What are the characteristics of someone who succeeds in this role? This is another great question for the hiring manager. Or you could be interviewing with a peer or a different manager. So looking at identifying what that looks like. And then also, what do you like best about working here? Seeing what people enjoy most. And then one of my favorites is the third question here is, what are some challenges you've seen people in this role or on this team face? That's a big one. What are some of the current challenges your company, your org, your team is facing these days? And how do you plan to move through them? You also want to get information from them. How do they see problems? How do they solve for them? How do they work through these issues? You want to establish that information because you're interviewing them as much as they are interviewing you. So ask those thoughtful questions. When you're wrapping up, be sure to send a follow-up thank you email. Send it within 24 hours. That way it's fresh. Make sure that you thank folks for their time, from the recruiter to the hiring manager, whoever you came into contact with, and reiterate your enthusiasm for the role and where your value add is. And if there was something that stuck out to you in that conversation that they said, put that in the thank you email. What that does is showcase that you were actively listening and keying in on their experience as well. Keep it to the point, but also not too short, right? We want folks to remember us. So having a few sentences, having a few paragraphs, talking about what happened that day and how you want to bring your skill set to this organization. Feel free to learn more on our website, indeed.com/hire/veterans. It's set up for you, and there's tons of resources and information that can help you out in this process. And we're also here for you, the folks who work here at Indeed. We want to see you be successful throughout this process. And remember, we are here to help people like you get jobs, veterans and folks in the military community. So thank you for being a part of today's session. And we look forward to seeing you in the future and getting you that job. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thanks, Tim. My name is Jackie Scarmazzo. I'm actually going to be leading the Q&A today, and I'm seeing some really great questions. But before we jump into that, let me introduce some of the folks on the panel. So again, I'm Jackie Scarmazzo. I am a technical recruiter with Indeed. I'm also a Navy spouse, so this is definitely very near and dear to my heart in any way that we can help you out. I'm going to pass this over to Christina. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today. My name is Christina Rippo, and I'm a university recruiter here at Indeed. Been with Indeed for a little over 5 years now, so really excited to be here to help answer any of your questions.
Awesome. Cynthia.
Hi, hello everyone. My name is Cynthia Garza. I'm a technical recruiter based out of Austin, Texas. I'm super excited to be here. I'm the daughter of an Air Force veteran and the granddaughter of my grandfather was in the World War II. So he was in the Army and fought in World War II. So super excited to be here, and thank you.
So I am going to go ahead and kick this off. And Cynthia, you're going to start us off here. So let me read this question. Is there any way to recover from a bad phone interview? Example, interview starts off fine, but then the one starts having trouble articulating answers and starts sounding off, we'll put that. What would you recommend for overcoming this?
Okay, great question. So is there any way to recover? My answer to that is absolutely. So first and foremost, I can appreciate anybody that is self-aware. So in the middle of your interview, if you notice that you're rambling, it's okay to stop and just take a second to recover. The bad thing as a recruiter, if I hear that somebody just is rambling and rambling and rambling and they never notice, that's definitely not a great sign. But when I'm speaking to a candidate that actually noticed that, that does show me that they are self-aware. So it's okay to say, you know what, in my excitement, I'm a little bit nervous today. And that's normal, right? When you're interviewing, you're going to be a little nervous. So it's okay to say, in my excitement, I think I rambled a little bit on that. So I'm gonna circle back and try that again. And then just try to recover right then and there. As a recruiter, I can definitely appreciate that. However, if you notice that after the fact, once you've already hung up, take some of those tips that Tim just discussed here a few minutes ago, and include that in your thank you email. So when you send that thank you email, be sure to include that. It's okay to say, just to be transparent with you, I was a little nervous. I got a little too excited, and I think I rambled a bit. These are the points that I would really like to reiterate, and maybe just highlight 3 bullet points of something that you were not able to convey in your phone interview. So absolutely, you can recover from that either during or after when you send that thank you email.
Awesome. And also, on another hand, I would love if anybody has a recommendation. What if you're nervous or there's a lot going on and you kind of lose your train of thought? What type of tools would we recommend?
Great question. So I'll take that one as well. So if you know that it's just in your nature that you're going to be nervous, and like I said, we're all human, and I think everybody is naturally nervous in any kind of interview. So if you know that ahead of time, first and foremost, you want to practice. Obviously, in our chat, we've posted several different resources. So there's so many different questions that you can practice ahead of time. So practice with a friend, practice with a neighbor, virtually, social distance, of course, or practice in the mirror. Do what's comfortable with you, but try to practice ahead of time so you have that verbiage just sort of fresh in your mind. And then during the interview, it's okay to have a notepad with you and take notes. Take notes on what your interviewer is saying. Make sure you understand the question. Jot down the question. Now, you're not going to have time to write down the entire question, especially if it's a lengthy question, but definitely jot down the bullet points and make sure you're answering the question. When you're done with that question, it's okay to ask your recruiter or the hiring manager, whomever you're speaking to, just to ask, did I answer that sufficiently, or would you like a little bit more detail? And of course, if they want more, they're going to tell you, yeah, go ahead and elaborate a little bit more on XYZ. But practice note taking and then repeat the question just to make sure that you've answered it. That should definitely help, just to kind of keep your thoughts coordinated.
I love it. Phenomenal. Thank you. I am seeing quite a few questions around salary. Salary for related to experience, salary for starting over in a new industry, and salary just in terms of 2020. Drew, I think you probably have some really great insight in this, and I'm sure everybody else does. But let me kick this off. I'm going to sum up one of these questions for you. But there was some mention, I think Mario was talking a little bit about how you're going to level the appropriate salary range with your experience, whether coming out of the service or maybe with industry experience or civilian experience. But there are some jobs that people have that are very specialized and maybe a little bit more limited. So it's more tough to find those specific jobs. And there is a concern that companies may be underpaying. So how would you recommend creating your salary goals or your salary range, and holding yourself to that?
Yeah, great question. Salary is always probably one of the toughest questions that anyone's going to get, because at the end of the day, we all want to get paid, right? One thing to do is, now that Indeed has partnered with Glassdoor, the amount of information we have on salaries is quite impressive. You want to do your research, do your homework, start creating what is the range that is expected, based on what reviews and what information you're seeing, but also what you personally have as a goal. Sometimes, as mentioned by Mario, you have to take a step back before taking a step forward. I've taken steps back a little bit in pay, knowing that, it gets me in the door, for a position that I'm really excited about. For those that are really, specialized and have that unique skill set that employers are looking for, understand your range is going to be important. So I wrote down over here on my notes, because, like Cynthia mentioned before, you want to have notes that you can quickly glance at. So for instance, if you're a strategist and you're looking at a range between 71,000 and 82,000 per year, one thing to keep in mind is talk to the recruiter while being interviewed, and just ask what the range is going to be. See if it's in line with the research that you've done. See where you kind of fall in that spectrum. When you get to the offer stage and they send you maybe 71K as the initial offer, you can always push back a little bit and say, well, based on my research and my qualifications, I think I would be better suited at 76 as a starting point because of X, Y, and Z. Now the employer goes back to everyone and be like, you know what, this person is right. Maybe we can bump it up a few extra thousand to make sure we're secure in this talent. At the end of the day, it is a talent war out there. So you want to position yourself in the best way possible to have them negotiate with you and say, we really want you to join our organization. Let's cough up that few extra thousand. Now, if you're not really getting what you're wanted, and you're kind of hitting that brick wall over and over again, maybe exploring different roles or going back to the drawing boards to see if you're kind of putting your bar set way too high, and doing like a self-check and a self-assessment. I think that's one of the things I've said for a few years now, is we always think we're worth more than we are to the employer. That's kind of one of those crazy things to think of. But at the end of the day, most employers do have a spectrum and a scale that they have to follow, because that goes all the way up to the top. So you have to play around with that wiggle room. You can't just, put your flag in the sand, so to speak, and not really be able to negotiate.
There's also a question in terms of not feeling like you can negotiate because you're currently unemployed. How would you go about doing that or addressing that?
I would say quickly to jump back in there. I would never take unemployment as a way not to negotiate. At the end of the day, the job is open because the employer needs to fill that position. And then doing your research and estimating what is it costing that company to have that position open? How is that really affecting their bottom line in business? Knowing that, you go back to the drawing boards and try to negotiate, even if it's an extra $1,000 or $2,000. That, that's a win, or maybe different benefits, or maybe a work from home, 2 days a week type thing. Never take unemployment, as a negative thing, and you're going to get the lowest paying job or the lowest offer. Go back in there and negotiate within a respected range and see what you can get from it.
I also think, just to wrap this up, is it's absolutely fine to request an additional interview with maybe the manager and ask about, talking about where they expect you to start your training, your ramp up time, so you better understand where that number came from. Awesome. Okay, Christina, I'm coming your way. What are some of the questions that we should be asking of an employer at the end of the interview?
Yeah, great question. And I know Tim answered this a little bit, and he had mentioned, what are the day-to-day responsibilities? What are the characteristics of someone you see who succeeds in this role? How is my performance measured? Things like that. So those are all great questions. But also, to add to that, if you're speaking to a hiring manager, one thing I always like to ask is, how do you manage your employees? You want to find out from your hiring manager, what type of manager are they? They might even kind of respond back with that of like how you like to be managed. Those are also, great, really segue questions that can open up a larger conversation to give you more opportunity to learn more about, what is it really like to work at this company? What is it really like to work for this individual and team? So those are also great questions as well. But also, you probably will find different questions that you'd like to ask while you're having that interview. So if the hiring manager or the interviewer, mentions a specific project that maybe the team's been working on, you can ask, like, what are the goals of this project? How is this going to help the team move forward? So you really will find those questions. But I think just making sure that you're hitting those points of like things that you really want to know that are going to help you at the end of the day make the decision of whether or not this is the right job for you. So if you get the offer, what questions do you need to know before you're able to say, yes, I can accept this role? So those are super important to think about when you're thinking of questions as well.
And I would just piggyback on that. And one thing I always like to ask is, where do you see myself, or where do you see the company going in the next 3 years? And I think getting out of the mindset of I need a job versus I want a career. And a career doesn't mean that you're going to be at this company for 20 years. A lot has changed since that mindset, but at least having like a 1, 2, 3 year plan and seeing where you're going to go. Again, maybe you're not going to get the amount that you want day one, but if they are going to invest in you for those next 3 years, then maybe, putting in that effort or taking that position would be the best thing for you.
Awesome. Okay, Cynthia, I've gone through multiple interviews with a company and a final step in meeting the team. What should I expect, and how can I best prepare?
Okay, thank you for the question. I always like it when candidates just ask me, what should I expect? It shows obviously that they care. So hopefully you are interviewing with an organization that the recruiter has that same mentality. So don't hesitate to ask the recruiter, what should I expect? How should I prepare for this? Even what should I wear? I know several years ago I was in a similar situation and I was invited to a breakfast with the team. And I didn't even know, should I order the pancakes, or should I just be a little bit, something a little bit cleaner? It was weird, but I had that conversation with the recruiter, what's the best way to prepare for this? So utilize your recruiter and just ask them, and they should be willing to give you a little bit of advice on that. And the other thing is, and this goes back to things that have already come up in the presentation, is just doing your research. A lot of times you can find that information online. I know we've mentioned Glassdoor. You can find tons of great reviews and see if you can find some of those answers that are out there of other people who've gone through the same experience. So the feedback's out there, the reviews are out there. You just got to be willing to, one, ask those questions and do a little bit of the research.
Okay, Drew. I am a maintenance coordinator who in the past worked on an on-call rotation as a tech. I'm applying for a coordinator position, but do I also let them know that I would work maintenance, but only in the on-call rotation?
I mean, that's a pretty tough question. It depends on what stage of the interview you're in. I know if you're speaking to some hiring managers and they're hiring you for a specific job, and you start talking to them about, well, I also know this one's open, and I'm willing to do this as well. That could sometimes give the wrong impression to that hiring manager, thinking that even though you're kind of showing you're a jack of all trades and you're willing to do different positions, um, sometimes they want like someone to just do that one position that they're hiring for. So I would say you want to get a feel for it. Maybe, mention that when you join this organization, you can be a jack of all trades and step in and help out and help grow this company if, the need is there. But I wouldn't start saying, hey, I'll be good at this one, and this one. Because I see that sometimes, and sometimes it can rub people the wrong way, thinking that you're not really focused or zoned in on the one job that you're applying to.
Awesome. Okay, Christina, I have a couple questions. So I'm going to try and sum up some of the answers that we're looking for. In regards to following up after an interview, what do you recommend? What if you don't have the emails? What do you do? And what are your thoughts on utilizing LinkedIn for interview follow-up?
Yeah, all great questions. So I would say in terms of following up, and if you don't have the specific interviewers' email addresses, it's totally fine to email your recruiter and ask for those. I've done it plenty of times for interviews when I've been interviewing, and most of the time they're more than happy to give you those email addresses for you to send a thank you. So definitely start there to say, hey, really loved interviewing with X, Y, and Z, wasn't able to catch their contact information. Would you be able to send that along to me so I can thank them properly? And then in terms of if for any reason they aren't able to give that to you, yeah, I would say it's totally fine to reach out on LinkedIn. But I definitely would use that as like a second resource, not necessarily the first one. You try to get their email address. But yeah, if for any reason you can't, it's totally okay to say, hello, like we interviewed today, or, we interviewed yesterday. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Wanted to connect. So that is definitely okay. And a lot of hiring managers will say, like, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn or some of those workplace social networks. So definitely think that's more than appropriate as long as, you don't have their contact information. So perfect.
I have also seen job seekers write hand notes if we weren't in the pandemic and just deliver them to the front desk. That's absolutely fine. Or reach out to maybe like their HR alias and ask for a good email to send a thank you to. Sometimes as a recruiter, we will absolutely share that with your interviewing team. So don't forget that you can definitely leverage your point of contact. Okay, awesome. Drew, if a job posting asks for certain certifications you do not have, but you're familiar with the job requirements, can you indicate in the cover letter or in the thank you letter that even though you do not have the certification, you are familiar with the job and willing to work towards one?
Yeah, I love this question because I'm one of those people who never really has the right certifications for the jobs I'm hired for or apply to. Before I even got into tech and program management and working at Indeed, I used to train canines, police dogs, search and rescue dogs. And the first job I got was a sales position in tech in New York City, which is a really hard market to get into. Didn't have the certifications, never did tech. My degrees weren't anywhere near what that was. However, the best thing to do is really look at what skills do you have, what real life experiences can you draw a parallel to, and how do you make sense of it for the interviewer or the recruiter who you're speaking to. Training dogs is pretty much the same as sales. You're selling your idea of how to best work with a canine and a person to somebody else. If they buy in, you sold them. So that was kind of what I did on the interview and let people know I can sell. And this is what I want to do. interviewer said, fine, start selling tech, learn the technology. So what I had to do then is show all the hiring managers that I'm willing and able to learn all these new skills and all these new technical terms and what the industry looks like. And that's kind of how you start building that resume. As I move to the position that I have now, too, a lot of certifications I'm working on. But again, showing that you're willing and able and you have the aptitude to learn and you're not going to stop no matter what, that's all they're looking for. Anyone can learn something new. So I wouldn't get too caught up on that, but you have to be willing and able to share that and show those experiences to the recruiter.
Awesome. Okay, Cynthia, I think this is probably going to be the last question, but I'm going to give you a couple questions. I'm seeing some questions around dealing with nerves when you're going into the interview. What are some best tips to practice? And also, how do you approach behavioral questions? How can you prepare for those?
That's a great question. So the behavioral questions, they are all over. Like I said earlier, we have so many resources with so many different examples of behavior questions. And I think with that, it just comes down to practicing. So I can't emphasize that enough. It's just practice, practice, practice. If you have to record yourself, that's not always comfortable. People don't like to either hear themselves. They think they sound funny on audio or even, setting up a camera and just practice. And so you can see if you have any nuances, if you say a lot, or if there's anything that you do, you absolutely have to practice. So unfortunately, that's the only way to get around that is just practice so you feel comfortable with that. And then when it comes to just preparing and sort of calming those nerves, I think everybody just has some different things that work best for them. For me, I like to listen to meditation apps. So there's some really great ones out there. Calm, Headspace are a couple that, we're not affiliated with them, but I highly recommend them just to kind of get you in the right mindset and the right state of mind. But if you're somebody that you enjoy candles, it's really a preference. Just doing whatever calms you down and makes you feel comfortable. So I think that one is just sort of personal to everybody, and it's going to just come with time to find out what gets you in the right headspace. But I believe it was Drew that mentioned it earlier, like you have to go in with confidence. You were already selected for a reason. We looked at your resume. There was obviously something that we liked about you and we're interested in moving you forward in the interview. So you have to remember that you were selected amongst many other people that do not have the opportunity to move forward. So keep that in mind. You're one of maybe several that didn't get the opportunity. Go in with that confidence and use that confidence to get you in the right state of mind.
Okay, I know that I said that was going to be the last one, but there's quite a few questions that I don't want to leave anybody hanging. Christina, I think this is all you. Talk about waiting, following up after you haven't heard. What's appropriate? What's best practices?
Yeah, great question. So it definitely, is, human nature to be really excited and waiting to hear back from an interview and a little nervous, hoping you hear, right after your interview. But really, it's okay if you haven't heard back within like a week or two. That is completely normal. You never know what stage of, interviewing the company is in. You could have been one of the first few interviews, and sometimes they do like to conduct all the interviews and then make a decision. So it's totally normal to not hear back for a few weeks. I would say give it a 2-week, time. And if you really, are still curious, just send a nice, polite, follow up to the recruiter, like, hi, was really happy to interview with the team. Just wanted to see if you had any updates on your end. Thank you so much for your time. And most of the time, they're totally open to, kind of being transparent about, hey, we're actually still interviewing. We're hoping to have some updates in the next, few weeks or the next few days. And then, once you hear back from that, you can kind of put that check marker on your calendar. Okay, they told me another few weeks. Let me just, wait it out a little bit, and then you'll likely hear back from there. So I would say that's a good kind of point. Give them at least 2 weeks. That way it's not too crazy, but gives you enough time to really say, hey, had a great conversation. looking for updates, and you should be good from there.
Yeah, and to piggyback off of that too, for whatever reason, say the role was recently filled, or they went with a different candidate, still having that constant contact with that recruiter and just saying, hey, keep me in mind next time this position is open. If it's for one of those like evergreen type of roles, that's going to save the recruiter time. Is also going to show the recruiter that you're geared towards getting this position, and you're really looking forward to working at that company. Persistence is probably the best word I could throw out here. You have to be persistent. There's a lot of candidates looking for positions, so the more touch points you make in a respectful manner and just staying on top of it can really help you out in the long run.
Awesome. Thank you so much to everybody who joined us today on the webinar. We were so excited to put this together. We wish you all the best of luck in your career ambitions. Please utilize our tools. We have such a wide range of different directions you can go to really fit any type of situation that you're looking for additional information. I hope you all have a great rest of your week. I wish you a belated Happy Veterans Day. And again, thank you so much. We hope to see you soon.